Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonkson, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, I'm so excited about today's podcast. We got my good buddy Darryl on today's show, and he is a pastor of a great church in Ohio. And we're talking about something really unique. How do we engage men in a greater way in the life of the church? We know that if men get engaged in the church in a greater level, then the family just follows. But how do you do that in a real practical way? I hope you enjoyed today's coaching conversation. How can I serve you today, man? What's on your heart? What's on your mind?
Hey, first off, I want to tell you thank you for the opportunity. This is the first time I actually got a chance to see the podcast. I've actually listened. I find that it's very productive when you're in the car just kind of driving and listening. And I tell you what, very insightful. I mean, I've heard a couple of episodes and I'm like, man, this is really good. So appreciate you taking time for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So first question I want to jump in, and it really deals with men. And really want to kind of get your insight into how do you get men not just to come to church, but to be engaged, involved, and then to take on leadership roles in the church. That's something that, we've had issues with in the past, getting men to commit to come, but even when coming there, times where we've tried to get men to say, hey, we want to get you into a leadership type of role, or maybe in a serving role, and that's not always easy. So how what can you offer or recommend to help us in that regards?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's a couple thoughts. One, I think it's great that you're even thinking that way, Darryl, because I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's somewhere up in the 80% that, if the man of the home follows Christ, the rest of the family will. If the woman, the percentages are lower. If the children, percentage lower. And that's not to demean the mom or the kids. That's just a reality. And going after the men, I think, is a great thing. So I love that you're doing that. I think that's awesome. Now, I do think there's a reality to it. There are always early, mid, and late adopters in anything. There's the parable of the sower. He throws out the seed, and only 25% actually do anything. The other 75% don't really last, and they don't do much. And so I do think there's a numbers game that you're playing. It's like, wow, got 100 men in the church, or got 50 men in the church, or whatever the size is, and they don't seem to be getting on board. Well, you're going to have a certain percentage that will and a certain percentage that won't, and some will take a while. However, all that said, let me give you something I think is worth considering when it comes to attracting men to engage spiritually and lead the home. Again, I'm sure you preach about it. There's Bible studies about it. There's probably men's groups. I'm sure you do all that stuff. The one thing that I think I think it's Christ Church of the Valley out in Arizona has done an extraordinary job. Here's what they did. Years ago, let me just give you a quick little story. And I've talked to the lead pastor. He told me about it. And he recently resigned, or not resigned, but stepped down, retired or whatever. And he's kind of taking a different role, new guy in. But back up, 25 years ago, whatever it was, his church is running, 500, 800, whatever it's running, 1,000 people. And he said after church on Sunday, he goes, it was the same thing. Now watch this. It's interesting. He goes, I walk outside in the lobby area. All the women are yakking, and the men are just standing off to the side trying to get the women to hurry up and finish so they can get to the car and go. And he goes, why are they doing that? And some of the women are looking at the flowers. Back in the day when you had to have flowers in the lobby every week. And so they would look at the flowers, and all this stuff. And he's like, the reason that these men aren't hanging out is we haven't designed it for them. So what he did was he just said, this is what he did. He goes, I wonder what it would look like if next week, instead of the flowers, I put out 2 or 3 Harleys and just see what happens. So he watched that over the next couple of weeks. Now, all the men are hanging out and talking, and the women are off to the side trying to be like, let's go. And so he came up with this idea. And let me just kind of share with you real quick. Apple products has what's called a brand target and a sales target. The brand target is that we want to be the brand for creative thinkers. So, I have an iPhone. The iPhone, Apple's like, we're creative thinkers. That's who we are. We're on the edge. We're cutting edge, whatever. Now watch it. Stay with me. I'm driving to a point here. That's the brand target, is like, we want to be creative thinkers. The sales target is anybody who wants to identify with creative thinkers. I'm not like that. I don't know how. I don't even know half the things this thing does, But I want to be in on it. I want to own the Apple and be all kind of cool. I want to have the Apple on the back of my laptop, And we identify. Now my dad's 86 as of yesterday, and he could care less about Apple phone. He's got a flip phone. And he don't care at all. Now the point is that they know exactly who they're going after. They don't care about my dad. They know that there's a certain percentage of the people that are never going to buy their phones. But we are going after creative thinkers and those that identify with creative thinkers, and that way we can own a very large portion of the market share. And so now take that. Let's move back to the story of the guy in Phoenix. So he sits there and watches these men gather around the Harley. So this is what he does. He looks at his staff, and I'm giving you a short version of what probably took them a year or two to discuss. But he said, we are going to be the church in all of Arizona. We are going to be about men and sports. Doesn't mean we're not going to have Sunday morning. Yeah. Doesn't mean we're not going to have Bible study. Doesn't mean we're not going to have women's group, men group. That doesn't mean that. But when you think of us, if anybody thinks about a man going to church or about sports, they're going to think of us. So if you and I were to hop in a car and head over to Arizona tonight around 7:00, we would pull up and see a church, and we'd see one of the largest sports complex for a church I've ever seen in my life. It looks like UCLA. It's unreal. I mean, unbelievable, incredible. The entire city uses their facilities. Everybody, because they're unmatched. Nobody can compete with the facilities they have. When you walk up to the church on a Sunday morning, there are flat screens everywhere with ESPN on there. They are going after men, and as a result, they have a massive amount of men that are leading the church and leading their homes. Now, I say all that to say, clearly, that takes years and that takes millions of dollars. But what can a person do at a church of 100, 70, 500, 1,000 that doesn't have 100 acres to build a massive sports complex or whatever he built it on? It's massive. Okay, what do you do then? I think you got to look at and say, okay, we've tried the Bible study. I've preached about it. I'm sure you have. I've shared about it. We've had signups. We did the men's breakfast on Saturday morning. All the things that you probably have done. I think it's worth stepping back and just thinking about, what is our brand target? What is our sales target? Can it truly be men? And if it is, how do we do that at this level? How do we create a church? Because when you create a church for men, men are attracted to it and women are attracted to bring their husbands to it. Because more than anything, women want their husbands leading spiritually.
Correct.
And that, I think, is a worthy conversation, because I could have went into Bible studies and breakfasts and all that stuff, and I already know you tried all that. Everybody listening to this thing has probably tried it. But you got to decide, to what level can one of our initiatives be at our church? Like, man, we know how to attract men. It's like throwing the Harley out there and then watching all the men stand around it. He's like, that's way before the sports complex. He's like, this is working. What could we do? How do we change this? So just some thoughts for you. Okay. So that was a very long answer to a short question.
No, actually, I found it very helpful. Actually, I want to kind of piggyback on it because, like you said, we've tried all those things, and I've tried the sports angle myself, because I grew up playing sports, so I know camaraderie, teamship, teamwork, all those things there. One of the challenges that we've had men who participate in the sports things, is getting men who will actually take a leadership role in
Sure.
church. I mean, I've even had men where I've sat with and I've watched them grow spiritually and say, we want to get you involved in. And I can think of one particular guy. He was like, I'm not ready for that level of responsibility or
Yeah.
commitment, or
Right.
it just served as a deacon. And I was
Yeah.
honestly, I was blown away because I was thinking this guy
Right.
had leadership potential beyond that, but I wanted to get his feet wet. And I was like, how do you run away from being a deacon?
Yeah.
So
Right.
so any additional insight you can give me to
Yep.
maybe some things we
Absolutely.
need to consider?
Yeah. The other thing is, I would say this. Let's just say the church is 100 people. It doesn't really matter, bigger or smaller. The thing that I would do is you're looking for what I call a tipping point. So, how do you change culture? Culture is always changed by the same three things: stories you tell, the heroes you make, and the things you celebrate. It's how you change culture. I've talked about that a lot. I've talked about it in some of my books. Here's what you got to do. You got to start making heroes and celebrate the men that are doing the things you want them to do. You got to make them the heroes of the story. You got to celebrate them. You got to point them out. And then all of a sudden it's like pulling, maybe there's 50 men in the church and you've got like 4 that actually do anything. Let that 4 become 6. Let that 6 become 8. And you literally tell them, guys, I want you to lead the way in this church. I want you to help me get more men involved in what we're doing. I want to make heroes out of you guys, because whatever you make a hero out of, the people will follow. You got to reward what you want repeated. Reward the behavior that you want repeated. And that's what you do. Or tell stories. Another thing is just tell stories about the behavior you want repeated. So you're looking for a tipping point where all of a sudden it's like 50 men and 5 are really committed. 50 men and 10 are really committed. And all of a sudden there's this thing starts changing. I did that with a church that was running about, 300 or so. Very traditional church. He can't seem to break anything. He's been there for a couple of years. I said, how many people do you think are really, really, really with you? He's probably 40. I said, pull them aside and start meeting with them regularly. And tell that 40's environment, tell their stories, till that 40 people's stories, that 40 people's energy starts to take over the church. It'll start taking over the church if you let it. You got to find the core inside of the group and make them the hero and watch what happens. That's how you do it. You can do that with a church that's been traditional and you got 300 people and they're all traditional, and what are we going to do? And it's the same thing. Find the group inside of the group, make them the hero, and other people will start to follow it. There's always early, mid, and late adopters. You're going to get the early ones. And guess what? Early, mid, late. So you got your early adopters, 5 guys. How do we get the mid to become part of the early? And that's where the tipping point starts taking place. Gotcha. They got to know what you're going after, those 5 guys. I'm just using the number 5. They got to know what you're going after.
Okay, so I think sounds like just reiterating and coming back, because so much of what you said, we've done, because I believe in catching people doing something well and celebrating them. We'll bring you on stage.
Yeah.
Try to, because the whole point is putting men before you so you can see other men. Having
Yep.
read books like Why Do Men Hate Going to Church and Man Up and stuff like that, and just sometimes it can be frustrating because obviously the women do it. they get it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
not that we don't want the men. Matter of fact, I even tell our praise team, sing in the key of men. Let's find songs that men can sing. I don't
Yeah.
want to sing flowery love song where I'm uncomfortable. I'm thinking like, I'm not trying to date Jesus. I want to serve Jesus.
Yeah.
So so uh,
Well, the one other strategy above anything else is just show the movie Sandlot. And after that, everything will come together for you.
touche.
If you're watching this podcast, Darryl and I are massive fans of
Massive
Sandlot.
Sandlot.
Oh, yeah. Everything rises and falls on Sandlot. Just show Sandlot and the whole thing will come together.
Hey, you know what? Don't tip me, because I just may bring that movie in. That movie's powerful.
Bring it in, brother.
All right.
Awesome. What else you got, man? What else you got on your mind?
Here's something I want to know. For a church on a limited budget,
Yep.
what kind of, if you were starting a church plant, you got a limited budget, how would you go about marketing that church in a community where it could build brand recognition and get people in the door at least for the first time?
Yeah, I think that there is in a church that, and I know your situation in your church, you've been there for a while, and it kind of seems like you've kind of hit a plateau.
Yeah.
There has to be. I love brand recognition. Don't get me wrong, but there's also there's got to be momentum. Nothing succeeds like success. The whole John Maxwell says the law of the big momentum, man, get momentum on your side. And if a church is running, for instance, 50 people, 60 people, because we have a rescue initiative, we have a lot of churches that we work with that are under 100. And I always tell them, I go, here's the good news. You don't need 100 people to create momentum. You get 20 or 30 people, and all of a sudden people think it's revival. Because now your church is running 1,000 and you get 30 people, no one knows or no one even notices. But if you're 50 and all of a sudden you're 80, that is enough to create momentum. So I always tell them, I'm like, there's a benefit because you don't need a lot of people to create the momentum. So when it comes down to a budget, there's a couple things. I don't know where you're meeting, but I would know this. If it's a smaller church, I would make sure it's set in an environment that doesn't feel empty. Definitely do not be in an empty room. No one wants to go to an empty, it just screams that nothing's happening here. And you don't want that. That's one thing. But now to the budget idea, there's two things that I think are important. One, you have to start working at creating an invite culture. The invite culture is, man, you got to start telling stories about people that are inviting or that got invited. Inviting or they got invited. You got to start telling stories. Remember, culture, stories you tell, the heroes you make, the things you celebrate. You got to make heroes and tell stories and celebrate someone that did some inviting or someone that got invited. Me and my wife been going to the church for a year and our life got turned around. Well, how'd you come to the church? You got to tell that story. You got to bring me up on stage and have a live testimony and have me and my wife go, you know what? Our marriage was not really all that great. A lady at the church that actually moved away recently, she doesn't even go to the church anymore because she moved away, but she's the reason we're here. That story, that creates invite culture. You got to create invite culture. The other thing that I would do is I don't think you build on big days. I think big days are a way for, I don't think you build on big days. I think they're a way to give people a very soft toss. Now, what do I mean by that? Soft toss is, it's a baseball term. It's like, dude, I can't make it any easier for you to hit this ball. And that's what you got to do for your people. So go back to, I was working with a church a while back, just kind of helping them a little bit. And they're probably running 100, maybe 80 to 100, 110, something like that. And I said, look, we got to start changing the invite culture. And they started working on it, started telling stories. I said, okay, now add some big days. They said, what's a big day? I go, well, Father's Day is already a big day. Mother's Day is a big day. Christmas is a big day. Easter's a big day. You already got 4 or 5 big days. Now, plop some other big days in there. And I said, find something that makes easy for people to invite. And and they said, well, what? And for instance, and they did this. It's like find the coach of a football team, or find the running back, or find some guy that came in 8th place on America's Got Talent. Find some reasons, but you got to do it consistently. People do it once and they mess up. You got to do it consistently, but it's only if you've spent time to build the invite culture. So the invite culture doesn't cost money. It's a matter of shifting culture. The big days and then promoting those big days. Again, I don't think you build on big days. I think the big days complement the culture you're trying to create. And now I think you're going to ultimately get into brand recognition, but when your church is 100 and less, there's probably not a lot of money to just create this great brand.
Right.
I would trade momentum at this stage over the brand. Like, let's just get some energy going. And then we can start thinking about, what do we, back to the apple. What do we want to be known for? Who do we want to be? We got to get some momentum going, because the longer a church stays at a number, the harder it is to break that number.
Yeah.
It becomes
That's what
much
we've
more
experienced.
difficult. The thing I
That's
always
exactly
say
what we
is
experience.
you're eventually your cement becomes concrete,
Mm.
and you better be careful because it's becoming concrete, and you got to shift it up a little bit. Again, that can happen at 50 people or 500 people. It doesn't matter, but eventually the cement becomes concrete.
What are your thoughts on a church? Because that's kind of where what I'm trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've wrestled with, is this the right area for us? Even because if you've been somewhere so long, people kind of know you.
Mm-hmm.
Have they just be like, oh, that's just that church there? Versus if
Mm-hmm.
you replant somewhere else, can that help be a part of the momentum driver going to a
Sure.
new community?
I think that it can. I do. Um, churches that experience like this bump in attendance, statistically, according to studies I've looked at, usually do it because new building um, or a new renovation. They've got some new building, a new renovation, and the third one is adding multiple services. Those three reasons usually create some sort of spurt of growth. However, you got to make sure that, okay, have we worked on the culture? Do we have the system in place when someone comes in? How do they get engaged in the life of the church? Do we have the leaders in place? Can we handle that? It's like you and I go to this 100,000 people carnival, festival, whatever in I don't know, in New Orleans, this big old festival where they're expecting 100,000 people, and we're the only snow cone stand, and it's 100 degrees and everybody wants snow cone, but you and I didn't think it through. We just have, this much syrup, and we can only make this much ice this fast. And it's like, yeah, we could have made 50 grand a day and we made $5,000 a day. Why? Because we weren't ready. And sometimes people want to put that, the whole cart in front of the horse thing. They want to put the product in front of the process. You got to say, okay, man, are we creating a culture? Have we tried the big days? When someone comes into the life of the church, do we know how fast they can get engaged? Like, have we worked on all these systems before? Because if you don't do that, you're looking for a silver bullet. A lot of churches do that. If we just got the right location, if we just moved into that area, I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily going to fix everything. So one thing I always say when I start coaching someone on a regular basis, through our coaching side of my life, I'll always tell them, hey, there's no magic bullet here. There's no silver bullet. You're looking for one thing to change everything. It's probably not the truth. There's probably a few things that need to change before we even start doing this. Again, it's the whole snow cone thing. It's like, yeah, we had 100,000 people standing in line and we could only serve one snow cone every 4 minutes. It's not going to work, man. Bring that into the church. It's like, oh, we got all these people. Yeah, where are they going? How are they getting engaged in the life of the church? How fast are they getting into volunteerism? Are those teams ready? Are they being led by leaders or managers? Like, there's so many things to consider. And if you put product in front of process, you usually end up tripping over yourself instead of process in front of product.
So, what you're saying, it just hit me. I thank you for it. One of the
Yeah.
things that we've struggled with is developing or having leaders in place. So when people come in, to put them, like, I'm bivocational, so a
Yep.
lot of things fall back to me.
Yep.
Um, then you have that middle gap.
Yep.
You have your younger people who are coming up, but say they're teens. Then you have your mature people who are like, well, I'm headed towards retirement, so I don't want to get involved in
Yeah.
too much. And having that middle gap and trying not to burn out the people who do that. One of the things that we're struggling with is the ones who do serve, they wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
But try, so just if you came in and examined our church and you saw that, what would be like if you're launching, what would you do to keep from burning out the pastor when you
Yeah.
don't have the workers yet to do what you want to do to reach the community?
Okay. So here's one of the things I think that people, and I don't know. I don't know if this is a mistake you made. So who knows? But most people are guilty of it. And that is we end up having more programs than we actually need, more Bible studies than we actually need, more men's things, women things than we actually need. Out here I live in Southern California. If you live in Southern California, the hamburger place to go to is In-N-Out.
Oh, I've been there.
In-N-Out hamburger. And everybody that lives in Texas talks about Whataburger, and I'm telling you, that's like a microwavable burger compared to In-N-Out. All my Texas friends are all mad at me. We argue on who has the best hamburger.
Hey, I've enjoyed both of them, so I'm non-biased.
And so anyway, so the In-N-Out hamburger, here's the thing that I always say. At the end of the day, you can get a double one, and then they have these like things called 4x4 that nobody even knows about. It's just 4 patties. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, Darryl, here's your options at In-N-Out. You want a hamburger, or do you want it with cheese? There's no bacon. There's no avocado. There's no sushi. There's no tacos. There's no burritos. They don't have anything. Do you want a hamburger, or do you want it with cheese? And go there tonight at 11 o'clock, and there'll be a line going literally 40 or 50 cars at every single In-N-Out, and it'll go all the way until they close at 1 a.m. It's unbelievable. And all they say is pretty much hamburger. At the end of the day, you get a hamburger or you get one with cheese. That's pretty much your options. My point for saying that is I think a lot of churches start off and they end up adding all these programs when in reality is like we don't have the leaders for them. What are the 2 or 3 things that we're going to do well? I remember when we started South Hills 25 years ago, at the very beginning, I said, there's only 3 things I really want to do. I want to put on great Sunday morning services. I want to put on great serving opportunities. I want people to serve and people to get in small groups. Yeah, but we need a men's Bible. We're not doing that. We need a women's. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that at all. This is what we're doing. We're going to do 2 or 3 things really, 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 really well, and let's see what happens. And church opened up and just took off. And we stayed true to that for a long time. Like, this is what we do. We don't do all this. And even to today, I mean, there might be a few more things, but did you know that churches over 1,500 statistically have less programs than churches under 500? Think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I've heard that. In fact, that's been our philosophy. It's like, get rid of everything. I tell our people, I say, man, you guys come to church way infrequently than I did growing up because I felt like it was a job. I didn't have time to sin because it was just, you were always there,
Right.
So, and that's been our whole focus is like, don't try to do too much.
Yep.
But even with that, just making sure that we can, I guess, try to get other people to, invite, I even get to the place where sometimes we used to we have these opportunities. I told my wife the other day, a couple of people who I have in mind, I said, I'm going to tell them, okay, here's your options. Which ministry you want to serve in? Not do you want to serve or because some of them get spiritual. I'm praying to see where God leads me. Well, until God tells you, I'm going to tell you right now, we can use you here. Then God can tell you later if you need to move you around. But it's just, just getting people to take ownership and take initiative, I guess, to serve in ministry versus being waiting to have a spiritual epiphany of where to serve at.
Yeah. Yeah. I love when people say that. I'm praying about it. I'm like, look, dude, it's an usher or a greeter. I don't think God's going to be upset which one everyone you choose. Just choose one. I don't think you need a big voice from God. You're going to be an usher or you're going to be a greeter. Not a big deal here. Anyway, what I'd say to that is just do everything you can to stay streamlined. Okay, what I always say is attraction and retention. Are we putting on amazing services, and are we retaining the people by getting them plugged into the life of the church? Bro, if I were to tell someone, I was on a radio show or something a while back, and the guy's all right, we've got about 45 seconds left. One caller just typed in, I guess, I don't know, they got some question thing going on. Yeah, how do you grow a church? 45 seconds. I'm like, okay. And I said, hey, all right. I said, 45 seconds. I go, here you go. I go, you got to put on really great Sunday morning services experience. Put on great services and get people plugged into the life of the church. Okay, well, I know there's a million other things, but in 45 seconds, I would say, how do we get more people here on Sunday morning? Figure that out. and put on a great experience. And then how do we get those people plugged in? Engagement over attendance. I always talk about that. How do we get people plugged in? So I just said in 45 seconds, we got 15 seconds left. Attraction, retention. That's where I'd spend my energy. That's where I'd spend my leadership. That's where I'd spend my passion. That's where I'd spend everything right now until we got momentum. And even at South Hills, bro, like, we don't even bring on youth groups until the church is like running 250 or 300. Like, we want the guy so focused on attraction and retention. Like, I don't want you worried about all this, man. If you're not putting on Sunday mornings that the youth can't get something out of it, then we have a problem, a whole nother issue to talk about. Gotcha. Okay. Now maybe you can run a small group for youth, but we're not hiring a youth pastor and like attraction, retention. We want momentum. Get that thing up to 200 or 300, then we'll start talking about some other things. But man, you gotta get that momentum going. You have to.
Is that the same regard? Is that the same in regards to children's ministry or just the teen ministry? Because so many people.
No, well, children you're gonna have on Sunday morning.
Okay, because after everybody, that's the first question people ask. Like, do you have
100%
kids ministry? You
have to. So here's the thing you're looking at for Sunday morning. You're looking at. I'll tell you what you're looking at for Sunday morning. Message. The 5 things I want to examine at someone's Sunday morning service. Message. Worship. I want a great message. I want it to be practical. I want people to understand it. I want it to be strong but clear. Worship. Is it good? Is it quality? Did the person communicate as if there was unchurched people in the room as well? Environment. Is the environment good? Is it clean? Is it ready? Is it good to go? Children's ministry. Is it good, strong, safe, wonderful? Kids love it, because if kids don't like it, they ain't bringing their parents back. And then the last one is next steps. How do I take a next step in the church and get involved? But really, if you think about it, whether it's worship, message, children, attraction, next steps, retention. I'm telling you, focus on that and watch what happens in the church. That's where you got to focus all your energy and all your leadership and all your resources. Attraction and retention. So, hey, man, we're out of time, but dude, this has been awesome. And I got to jump on another one, but man, it's been great hanging out with you, and sure do appreciate you jumping on here today.
No, I thank you. Appreciate it so much. I'm glad that we were able to connect, and I'm looking forward to growing and learning all that you got inside of that skull of yours up there.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Take care, Chris.
Appreciate you, my friend. All right.